Welcome back to another casual deck tech with Unplayable MTG. Today I want to take you through one of my all-time favorite decks, helmed by Francisco, Fowl, Marauder, and Kediss, Emberclaw Familiar. Now, ever since he was released, I've always wanted to build a Kediss deck. I first saw Kediss in action against a Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator deck, where Kediss is incredibly strong, since Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator triggers off of any damage. Your Kediss trigger nets you 3 treasures anytime you hit any of your opponents, which is really, really powerful. And I thought that was such a cool interaction and such a unique ability that I immediately wanted to build it myself. But I quickly realized that most Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Kediss decks were really just secret combo decks built around Glinthorn Buccaneer, which, if you don't know, is a pirate that goes infinite with Malcolm on the battlefield. As anytime you discard a card, he deals 1 damage to each of your opponents, giving you 3 treasures, which can be paired with his own ability to discard more cards, deal more damage, make more treasures, and drain out the table. So I eventually abandoned my plans to build a Malcolm and Kediss deck. But when Francisco released, and Francisco, you'll notice, has very similar wording to Malcolm, where whenever a pirate, which Francisco is a pirate, deals damage to a player, Francisco explores. This is a much more fair version than Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator, but as soon as I saw it, I knew, yep, this is a deck I have to build. Now, similar to Malcolm Keen-Eyed, anytime Francisco deals damage to a player, you get 2 triggers. First, Francisco explores, and as a reminder, anytime you explore, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, that goes right to your hand. If it's a non-land, you can either leave it on top or put it in your graveyard, and the creature that explored gets a +1/+1 counter. So that's the first trigger that happens. The second trigger that happens is from Kediss, which lets Francisco hit your other 2 opponents for that same amount of damage. Now, again, Francisco doesn't care about the kind of damage he's dealing to a player, so this will immediately trigger Francisco 2 more times, meaning every time he deals combat damage to 1 player, you get 3 explore triggers. And while that isn't as strong as getting 3 treasures, this is still an incredibly powerful ability. It lets you fill your graveyard, it makes Francisco really big, really fast, and it basically guarantees that you'll hit your land drops. In fact, I found this deck to be so consistent and so surprisingly powerful that I've nicknamed it Removal Check. Basically, if my opponents don't have a way to interact with Francisco and Kediss, I'll probably win by turn 6. It's okay if you don't believe me yet. We're going to goldfish some hands at the end of this video, just so you can see how explosive it can be. But trust me, this deck really can close out games very quickly. All right, with that said, I'm going to take you through these category of cards I've laid out here so you can get an understanding of what's in the deck and how it works. Over here is just my lands. Nothing too special about those. I run 36 lands in the deck, and I actually have considered multiple times going down in lands just because Francisco is so consistent at getting lands to hand that I often end up flooding out. This category right here, this is the most important category in the deck. Every time I play, I will mulligan until I have at least 1 of these cards in hand and at least 2 lands. And I will happily go down to 5, maybe even 4 cards to make sure I have this in my opening hand. I need 1 of these cards to get Francisco off the ground and able to hit somebody for damage. And I need some lands, obviously, to cast my spells. So let's talk about those early turns. On turn 1, there's a good chance I'm just playing a land and passing. However, I do have some cards that I will play. First, I do run Sol Ring. It's really the only traditional ramp I play in the deck. I mean, I have Myriad Landscape and some ritual effects, but generally speaking, this deck does not need to ramp. It has a low curve, and its goal is to just get on the field and start smacking face. Outside of Sol Ring, there are 4 cards in this category. There's 14 cards total in the category, and 4 of them I would play on turn 1. Those 4 are Lava Spur Boots and Boots of Speed. These are both important because they equip for 1, give a creature haste, but more importantly, give a creature +1/+0 until end of turn. That's really important because Francisco has 0 power. And so having cheap equipment that give Francisco a positive power boost lets me hit for damage so that he can explore. These in particular are the only 2 1-mana equipments that provide a power boost and give haste. So they're very important to the deck. The other 2 cards that I would play from this section are rituals, Simian Spirit Guide or Dark Ritual. If I have any of these other enabler cards in my hand, my turn 1 play, I will just play a land and pass. Then, assuming I didn't have one of those turn 1 plays, which is the most likely scenario, I will simply play Francisco or Kediss on turn 2. Which I play is probably dependent on what card I have out and what my mana base is, but generally speaking, I probably lean to playing Francisco first, unless I have one of the cards that grants Francisco haste in my hand. Then, on turn 3, I'm playing the other half of my commander, and then I'm using my third mana. I'm casting any one of these spells that provides a power buff, and this is absolutely crucial to my game plan. Some other fun ones that I have in the deck: Scornblade Berserker provides a +1/+1 counter, and then I can sacrifice it later to draw a card. Spiteful Hexmage gives a creature a cursed roll, which makes its base power and toughness 1/1. Normally this is a downside, but with Francisco, that's actually a buff. I also like Escape Velocity, which it can be cast from my graveyard. Blazing Shoal can be cast for free if I happen to be mana screwed. And then the three at the top here, Professor's Warning, Armor of Shadows, and Boon of Erebos, all work as pseudo protection if I draw them later in the game. I'll also mention Tainted Strike. A lot of people do have problems with Infect, but not only does it enable my game plan to get things going, I can use this as a late game finisher to kill the table in one go, so it definitely makes sense in my deck. And then some of you might be wondering, what do you do if every player has a blocker? And onto that, I will say so far that has never happened, and I suspect it never will. Francisco is a flying creature, and he only needs to hit any open player to trigger on the other players at the table. I have never seen it where all three players have flying blockers. And even if they do, I do have Dust Corona in particular, which will make Francisco unblockable since he will no longer be able to be blocked by flying creatures. Even so, I don't think that's necessary. So far, it has never happened. Moving on, this next category over here is my removal. And some of my removal is very generic. Deadly Rollick is just good because my commanders are low mana value and will likely be out most of the game. Zoyawa's Justice, Chaos Warp, nothing special about those. Just effective ways to remove potential problems that could be getting in my way. Some more interesting inclusions in the deck are Retribution of the Ancients. If I do need repeatable removal, this lets me take +1/+1 counters off of Francisco or my other creatures to remove a problem on the board. Lurking Chupacabra, also super interesting. It dishes out -2/-2 increments every time I explore, which means I can easily give a creature -6/-6 every time Francisco hits for damage, which can be very powerful. I mentioned as well that I'm very often filling up my graveyard, so I can take advantage of these split aftermath cards like Cut to Ribbons. Cut is a decent removal spell, but the flip side is Ribbons, which will serve as a late game closer if needed. Murderous Cut is in for similar reasons. My graveyard is often very full of cards, so this is just a 1 mana feature removal option. Moving on to this category here, I want to talk about my draw. I have quite a few cards that can give me card advantage in one way or another, and I already mentioned that Francisco himself lets me draw a lot of lands, which in and of itself is card advantage. Speaking of my commander drawing me lands, I actually threw in Magmatic Insight, which is discard a land to draw 2 cards for 1 mana. I frequently have 3-4 lands in hand, so discarding 1 to get 2 fresh cards is often very good. I also have cards like Dogged Detective, which I can put in my graveyard with an Explore trigger, and then he will return himself to hand anytime a player casts their second spell, which is very common. When he hits the field, he also surveils 2, which can be useful. I think he's a good fit in the deck overall. I have a few cards that care about creatures with +1/+1 counters. Yathin Tombguard will draw me a card anytime a creature with +1/+1 counter deals combat damage to a player. This works with Nakara Lair Scavenger and Skyclave Shadowcat as well, who also draw me cards when creatures with +1/+1 counters on them die, which isn't ideal, but it does sometimes happen. Ox of Agonis is another particularly powerful draw spell in the deck, as I can throw him into my graveyard from an escape trigger, and then cast him with it for his escape cost later to discard whatever is in my hand, probably a bunch of lands, refill my hand a little bit, and get another attacker in play. One more card I want to call out is Tavern Brawler, which gives all of my commander creatures an ability to exile a card off the top of my library in my upkeep. This not only buffs Francisco so that I can hit him for more damage, but with partner commanders, you actually get 2 of these triggers if both are in play. That can be an excellent draw option in the right situation. Moving on, let's talk about this category here, which is my game enders. And some of these are a little more expensive to cast than a lot of the cards that I've listed so far. But that's because, again, these cards are here to close out the game. For example, Uncivil Unrest gives all of my creatures with +1/+1 counters the ability to deal double damage. That's extremely powerful with Francisco and can really, really close out the game quickly. This is even more powerful with Francisco than you might realize, as when he deals damage to the first player, that damage is doubled. Then, Kediss' trigger goes on the stack, and the damage is doubled again. So let's say you swing at the first player for 5 damage, which will be doubled to 10. That will trigger Kediss, who will let Francisco deal that damage to your other 2 opponents, only now it's doubled to 20. I also have quite a few ways to give my commander double strike, as that not only lets me deal double the damage, but also trigger an additional 3 explorers on my turn. I also run a few cards that give me additional combat phases. The best one in the deck is Seize the Day, as it is an extra combat step for 1 creature with flashback, and the flashback cost is just 2 generic and 1 red mana. I've had it in multiple games where, as I'm exploring with Francisco, I hit this, throw it right into the bin, only to cast it from my graveyard and take an extra combat to close out the game. Finally, the last grouping of cards I have over here, they're kind of cut off because they don't fit into any specific category and they are less essential to the deck. I mentioned Soul Ring already, but this also includes cards like the Ozolith, which, if my commander dies, is relevant. Claim to Fame is another interesting Aftermath card, where Claim can reanimate my commander from the graveyard, and Fame can then give him haste, which is nice if he does die. Westgate Regent is another card that is expensive, but if I'm locked out of my commander, he is an alternate way to close out the game, especially working well with those extra combats and double strike effects like I mentioned. Dragon Cultist makes it so that anytime my commander connects for damage, I'm going to be getting 1 or 2 4/4 dragons at the end of turn. Again, just another alternate win con. Finally, Rising of the Day is a haste enabler that buffs my commander. So, like I said, these are important to have in case I do have to recast my commander so I can get the ball rolling over again. And there you have it. That is a quick rundown of the cards in my Francisco, Fowl Marauder, and Kediss Emberclaw familiar deck. Next, I want to shuffle these up so we can play some test hands and see just how quickly this can get out of hand. I've given the deck a few shuffles, but let's do one more for the camera before we take a look at what this deck can do. Just get those cards good and mixed. One final cut. And let's take a look. First, Hall of the Oracles, Detective Phoenix, Archpriest of Shadows, Bloodsworn Steward, Jessica Thrice Reborn, Tyrite Sanctum, and Rakdos Carnarium. So notably, this does not have any of the cards that I need to enable my strategy. It also has bad mana base, nothing good going on. That is definitely a mulligan. To save some time, I'm just going to put these on the bottom and we're going to draw a fresh 7. Not going to shuffle. This one, Lurking Chupacabra, Mountain, Bajuka Bog, Westgate Regent, Painted Strike, Gavel of the Righteous, and another mountain. This is playable. It's not great. I would like to have a little bit more going on, maybe some better finishers or some removal or some protection, but I don't really want to mulligan again, and it does have one enabler card. Again, one I'd prefer to have later, but I'll take it. So this is one I'll keep, and let's see how it goes. All right, turn 1, I will first draw a card. Sulphurous Springs, which is a good draw. I still think, unless there was a definite graveyard heavy strategy at the table, I still think I would start with a tapped Bajuka Bog and pass. Going on to my turn 2, untap that Bajuka Bog. I drew a Jeska's Will. That will be good later, but for now, we will just play a mountain into Francisco. Since there's no haste enablers in hand, I definitely need to cast Francisco on 2 so that I can get the chain going on turn 3. Then, assuming no one removes Francisco, which typically no one does on turn 2, I will untap and draw for turn. I got Dark Ritual, a little late, but better now than never. Looking at my hand, I definitely need to cast Francisco, and I definitely need to cast Tainted Strike. I'm just trying to see if there are anything I could do with Dark Ritual that would really make this turn explosive. And I think there is something I'm going to do here. First, I'm going to play that Sulphurous Springs. Then I'm going to tap my Bojuka Bog to cast that Dark Ritual. So I will float 3 black mana. I will use... I could do a Jeska's Will here, but I don't think I want to do that yet because I have plenty of cards in hand. So I'm actually going to use 2 of that mana to cast the Gavel of the Righteous. Gavel of the Righteous puts a counter on itself at every combat, and eventually it's going to get to the point where it gives my commander double strike for basically a free equip. So I think getting it out early so I can start getting counters will be beneficial to my plan. Next, I'll use 1 more of those floating black to cast Tainted Strike on my commander. Then I will use 1 more floating black and a red to cast Kediss. Currently, my commander is a 1/1 with Infect. I'll go to combat, I'll get a charge counter on here, and I will swing out for 1 damage. This will explore 3 times. First explore trigger will be a Dust Corona. That's a great card, but really it's only good early, so I will put that in the bin and put a +1/+1 counter on my commander. Second, Retribution of the Ancients, also to the bin. And finally, a Mountain, which will go to my hand. So at that point, at this turn, I got 2 counters on my commander. Kediss is in play, Gavel of Righteous is in play. Feels pretty good to me. Pass the turn. Moving on to turn 4, I will untap and draw for turn, which is a Soul Ring. Never say no to a Soul Ring. At this point, I think we are ready to play that Jeska's Will. I will start by playing the Soul Ring, tapping my Bojuka Bog. Then I will tap Soul Ring and a Mountain to cast Jeska's Will. Let's say no one in the game has more than 5 cards in hand, so I'll have Jeska's Will make me 5 red mana. That represents my 5 floating mana, and I will exile the top 3 cards of my deck. Lava Spur Boots, Bloodline Tracker, and Nakara Lair Scavenger. Not exactly explosive hits, although I don't mind seeing the Lava Spur Boots. I also notably did not get a land, so I will play a Mountain from my hand for turn. Looking at my hand, I also actually think my Lurking Chupacabra is better than many of these cards. So I'm going to spend 3 of the red mana, lose a life to my Sulphurous Springs, and I will cast that Lurking Chupacabra. I now have 1, 2, 3 remaining mana. So I will actually just cast that Lava Spur Boot and equip it to Francisco. This makes Francisco a 3/3. These will remain in exile. I'll then go to combat. This will tick up and get a second counter. Again, when it has 4 or more charge counters on it, equipped creature has double strike. So we're getting there. I'll then go to combat and I will smack my opponents for 3. So each of my opponents has now been dealt 4 damage total by Francisco. I also have 3 explore triggers, which will each give -2/-2 to creatures, probably letting them remove something on the table. My explore triggers will hit an overpowering attack. That is something I definitely want in my hand, so I will leave it right there and I will take the 3 counters. Now, assuming no one has removal, there's a good chance I'm about to untap on turn 5 and kill somebody. I will untap, let's say nobody had removal, and I will draw that overpowering attack. Play a land for turn. I only have 2 cards left in hand, so I'm kind of surprised I haven't gotten more lands yet, but that's okay. I will start by playing 1, 2, what's the equip here? So the equipment, this is pay 3 or remove a counter from it. I will just pay the 3 to equip that onto Francisco. This will also buff his power by 2, so he will currently be at a 7. Or sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's an 8 power. I will then go to combat, and again, assuming there is no removal, this will tick up. He is now 9 power. I will hit my opponents for 9 damage. One player will now have taken a collective, 4 + 9, 13, and commander damage, with the others have just taken 13 overall. I will explore 3 times. First explore Bolt Bend, straight to the bin, and I will get a counter. Next explore Simian Spirit Guide, don't need that. Get another counter. Third explore Mountain, that will go to my hand. Now my commander has dealt damage, which means I can cast Overpowering Attack for its free running cost. That is 3 mana, which I will gladly pay. This gives me a second combat phase. Now, again, no one has interacted with me. It is turn 5. I will untap my commander, who has 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 power, and go to my next combat phase. On my next combat phase, this will trigger again. Now my commander has 6, 7, 8, 12 power, and double strike. I will move to attack one of my opponents who isn't going to die to commander damage, so I can get the double strike. On the first strike damage, I will get 3 explore triggers. Uncivil Unrest. Because I'm going to end the game, I will just leave that on top and take the 3 counters. So each player will take that 12 damage. I'll get 3 counters going up to 10, 11, 15 damage for the second strike, hitting each opponent for second strike, or for an additional 15. If I do the math, that's 15 plus 12, 27, plus, I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was 4, so I've done 31 damage and killed a player. I don't know. Either way, the game is close to being over, and I'm feeling really good about this keeping that opening hand. Let's shuffle up and try again. So let's give the deck one more quick shuffle on camera, and then let's see what we draw. First, Inti, Unforgiving One, Muraganda Raceway. Forgot to mention I do have some of the max speed cards just because the deck is quite aggressive. Molten Collapse, Mountain, and Deathgreeter's Champion. This is definitely not a keepable hand. It has no way to make black mana, and it has no way to pump Francisco's power. So we'll put that on the bottom, and we'll take our free mulligan. Next hand, Smoldering Marsh. Swamp. All right, we got the lands we need. Skyclave Shadowcat. Swamp. Mountain. Lizard Blades, and Foreboding Ruins. This is very heavy on lands. 5 lands. I probably wouldn't keep this, but you could keep it and just hope to draw into one of my enabler cards. I'm going to mulligan and go down to 6 cards. Again, my deck, it's okay if you go down to 6 or 5. It's more important to have a good opening hand. Archpriest of Shadows, Temple of Malice, Swamp, Lava Spur Boots, Deadly Rollick, Bolt Bend, and Spiteful Hexmage. All right, this is a keepable hand. We got there. We are going to have to put one back, and I think the obvious one here is the Archpriest of the Shadows. 5 mana is not coming up anytime soon, so let's put that on the bottom, and let's keep 6 cards and see how things go. One thing I will point out is this has a turn 1 play with Lava Spur Boots, but with Temple of the Malice, I would probably rather get that in play tapped first, unless I draw an untapped land here. Draw for turn. Oh, I got a Simian Spirit Guide. That does change things a little. I think I will still do the Temple of Malice and scry 1. Insult to Injury. Nope, I'm not looking for that. I think I want to land. So put that on the bottom. But I think I actually will... Nope, I won't do the Simian Spirit Guide for the Lava Spur Boots. I'll just do that and pass. I will untap and I will draw for turn 2. And we got a command tower. So we got the land we needed, meaning we could have done the Lava Spur Boots last turn if we wanted. Still, I think I'm just going to do 2 mana, cast Francisco, and pass. Moving on to turn number 3. Untap, draw, we hit another land, so we're good on lands. This turn, I think we would like to play a few cards. We'll start with a Mountain into Kediss. Then we will cast the Spiteful Hexmage, putting the Wicked roll. Is it Wicked? What is it? Cursed roll. I'm sorry. Putting the my watch is in there. Putting my cursed roll onto Francisco, so that turning him into a 1/1. I could again exile the Simian Spirit Guide to play the Lava Spur Boots. It just doesn't feel necessary yet. So we will go to combat, and I will swing for 1 at each of my opponents. It is turn 3. Each of my opponents takes 1 damage, and I have 3 explore triggers. Kick in the door. Not needed anymore. Next, Bojuka Bog. That will go to hand. And Kazul's Fury. I'll also put that in the bin. So we end the turn with a 3/3 commander. Going to turn 4, untap. Here's my hand, and we will draw another land. So we currently have 3 lands in hand. A few things we can play, but 1 is removal and 1 is protection, with Lava Spur Boots being another slight bump. I think in this case I would just put the Lava Spur Boots onto my commander. Might as well get that +1/+0. Then I would play Bojuka Bog, exiling someone's grave. Well, yeah, I think that's Let's say there's something worth hitting. I get summoned to someone's graveyard, and I can hold up both Deadly Rollick and Bolt Bend with this single mana. Go to combat. We'll swing Francisco, who is now hitting for 1, 2, 3, 4 damage on turn 4. I hit for, was it just 1 damage last turn and 4 damage this turn, so it'll be a total of 5 damage dealt to each of my opponents, and I will have 3 Explore triggers. Cut to Pieces, love to see that hit the graveyard. Uncivil Unrest, that will stay on top, and I will get another 2 counters, up to 5. I will then pass the turn, but let's say for sake of this Goldfish, I have to cast my Deadly Rollick and my Bolt Bend. Bolt Bend can be cast for a single red mana, now that Francisco has grown in power and not to have more than 4 power. So let's say we cast those. Next, we untap on turn 5, and we draw that Uncivil Unrest, which costs 5 mana, which is exactly what I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We will tap out to play that Uncivil Unrest. And things are about to get pretty disgusting. We go to combat. Again, we have 5, 6, 7 power. We will swing out and connect with one of our opponents, who will take double damage thanks to Uncivil Unrest. That player will take 14. If I've only hit the same player for each turn so far, that would have been 1, then 3, right? Or was it 4? That was 1, then 4, I believe, to 5. And then now this one, which is 14, which would be 19. So they're almost dead to commander damage. However, when the Kediss trigger goes on the stack, that 7 damage is doubled to 14 and then doubled again to 28. So those other 2 players have taken an insane amount more damage than the player I actually hit with my commander. And again, I will have 3 Explore triggers. Blood Tracker, I'll put that in the yard. Armor of Shadows, put that in the yard. Boon of Erebos. Looking at my hand, I do have a land. I'd rather not draw a land, so I'll leave the Boon of Erebos on top at this point. Now again, it is turn 5, and I have almost killed all of my opponents. If they have no interaction, and actually in this case I had a Bolt Bend, so they might have even had 1 piece of interaction, I will untap on turn 6, and the game will almost assuredly be over, especially because I've drawn Boon of Erebos, which is pseudo protection. So I'll untap, I will draw that, I'll go to combat. If there are no blockers, if there are no interaction, the game is over on turn 6. Let's shuffle up and try one more. Shuffle the cards up on camera. Give them 1 cut. See if we can't draw into something juicy. Uncivil Unrest, incredible. Lava Spur Boots, things are looking good. We just need lands. Kicking the door also does the job. Seize the Day. Emberclaw Raceway, we're in need of some lands. There's 1. Swamp and Forge of Heroes. Oof, this one is risky, but I think I would keep this. All I need is a red source, and I'm looking really, really good. So we will untap and draw for my first turn. Insult to Injury, not a red source of mana. We'll start with that Swamp into the Lava Spur Boots. Turn number 2, we will draw, and look at that. Got the red source we needed. I will do that, and since I have the haste, I typically do like to cast Kediss first, because if I lose Kediss, I think Francisco's a little better at getting me back into the game since he draws me lands. But like I said, no one kills things on turn 2, or at least they rarely do. Untap turn 3. Everyone deployed ramp pieces, because of course they did. I'll cast the Emberclaw Raceway as my land for turn, just because I want to get that max speed. Cast Francisco. Equip the Lava Spur Boots, giving him Ward 1, which is relevant. Going to combat. Turn 3, I will hit each of my opponents for 1 damage, and I will explore 3 times. Opal Palace will go to hand. Dogged Detective will go to the graveyard, and I'll get a counter. Swamp will go to hand. Only 1 counter there. That's a little disappointing. 5, 6, 7, 8. That also leaves me with 8 cards. I will discard this Forge of Heroes. Now, I normally would want Seize the Day in my graveyard, but being able to play for 4 isn't bad either, so that's currently my plan for next turn. I will untap on turn number 4. Draw for turn. It is another land. We're hitting my land drops. Well, let's see. I don't think it matters what I play for a land. I will do a mountain, go to combat, and I will swing Francisco. It was turn 4. I have now hit my opponents for 3 total damage, and I'll explore 3 times. Deflecting Swat. That will stay on top. and I will get 3 more counters up to 4. But wait! 1, 2, 3, 4. I will cast Seize the Day, untapping my commander and getting a second combat phase. All right, turn 4. I had hit my opponents for 3 total damage. I'm going to my second combat, where I'm now hitting for 5. So I've hit my opponents each for 8 total damage. Again, deflecting SWAT, way too good to pass up. We leave that on top. Francisco is now at 8 power. And I hit them for 1, then 2 for 3, and then... wait, it was actually 4, 5, 8. 8 total damage. Yeah, okay, 8 total damage. All right, let's move to turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, 6 cards in hand. Let's move to turn number 5. And like I said, if there is no interaction, I have definitely won the game. Not definitely, but almost definitely. Because I will untap. I will play a swamp for turn. I have the deflecting SWAT to protect my commander, and I have a couple options. I could do a Seize the Day line. This would give me 2 more attacks. The first one being for 8, which takes one player up to 16 with another combat phase to kill him and leave my other opponents very low. I could also do an insult to injury line to double my damage. That's 3 mana. I think it makes most sense to do the Seize the Day line, though. Oh, and I could also actually cast Uncivil Unrest to double the damage. But I think the Seize the Day line makes the most sense because it keeps cards in my hand and uses resources in my graveyard. So I'll start by playing 1 mana. I will kick in the door to increase my commander's power by 1. I also get to Venture in the Dungeon. We're going to skip that. Yes, I will then go to combat, and I will swing 6, 7, 8, 9 damage at each of my opponents. Previously, I had done 8. It is now up to 17 per opponent, and I will explore 3 times. Since I want to close out the game, I will just leave Molten Collapse on top and get 3 more counters. I am now up to 11, 12 power. I will then flash back, Seize the Day from my graveyard, untap my commander, and go for a second combat phase. This is now hitting for 12 after I've hit each player for a 17 damage, was it? So 12 plus 17 is about 30 damage. Whoever I'm smacking has died to commander damage, and my other opponents are now extremely low. I will get 3 more explore triggers. I will now put the Molten Collapse into my graveyard. Flip Magmatic Insight. Actually, that'll let me draw potentially, so I'll leave that one on top, take 2 more counters. If by some miracle my opponents aren't dead, they are very low, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards in hand with a deflecting SWAT. There you have it. That's a few games where you can see the power of Francisco and Kediss quickly cascading out of control if not dealt with. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any ideas for cards I may have missed in my deck, or you think my deck is actually trash, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it.